came here originally because my wife is Czech, and so she introduced me to the country, and that initial introduction became, in fact, a fascination with the Czech lands. Initially, there seemed to be no connection between Afghanistan and what I call the Czech lands. What I discovered is that there are actually some interesting parallels and problems that Czechs and Afghans have both had to deal with if you look at the deep history of the Czech lands. And in particular, you have small countries who have had to deal with the invasion and occupation of large imperial forces. Both countries have, that's the guiding problem in both cases. Whether it's the Iranians or the Persians and the British or Islam or tribes coming down from Central Asia, this has been the dominant theme in Afghan history. And I think the same is true in the Czech Republic, that the society that you see is so much influenced by the fact of Bílá hora, by the fact of the Austrian occupation and dominance of Bohemia for so many centuries, by the Nazi occupation, and by the communist, essentially the Soviet occupation. And the Czechs and the Afghans have dealt with those problems in very different ways. And so what I've seen as kind of a central issue that I'm looking at right now is really analyzing, comparing those different responses.
Опять на душу класть тяжелый камень, опять нести на родину героев, которым в 20 лет могилы роют, которым в 20 лет могилы роют.
Right after I graduated from college, I went to Afghanistan, and I had a job teaching English at the American Center. And it's hard to imagine now, given where Afghanistan is, but at the time it had a thriving school, an English language center. Probably 300 or 400 students would attend school English classes there. During the morning and afternoon program, there's a library, a snack bar, a movie series, and it was a different world. Well, I went to, as I said, I went to Afghanistan for the first time before the war, and then I did my PhD research in Peshawar, Pakistan, with the Mujahideen who were fighting against the Soviets in the 1980s. And so I had a chance then to go inside Afghanistan to see the country in the 1980s, and then again I went back just before the Taliban invasion in the 1990s, and again since the American entrance into Afghanistan in 2002. So I've had a chance to see it at these different stages, and I guess one of the questions is not so much what has changed. It's maybe even a more apropos question is what hasn't changed, because so many things have changed, from the livelihoods of people to the nature of how people live on the land, the housing, the kinship structure. There's, basically in every respect, things have changed. There isn't a sector of life in Afghanistan that hasn't been affected. As well you can imagine, more than 30 years of war leaves its mark. The myth that I would pinpoint is the idea that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. You hear that often, it's the title of a book, and it's often used. And I think it's inaccurate and misleading, and actually kind of, in a sense, lets America off the hook. In this sense, if you say that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires, the implication is that it was inevitable that we would fail, that Afghanistan can't change, it's in some ways static, immovable, and even resistant to history.